Hello and welcome to Kelly's Anesthesia Tips. I had a special request to do a quick YouTube on physical status modifiers by an anesthesia friend, so this is for you. Physical status modifiers, we are now fortunate that we have so many good resources that we can access information regarding payment for these. The good news, bad news, is that there are still payers that pay for this. Good news. Bad news, some of them are starting to kind of follow Medicare and not want to pay for the physical status codes or modifiers based on Medicare bundling these services, which is not quite fair because Medicare is a government payer. They are trying to save money. They have always bundled these into their services. So first I want to talk about the resources. Then I want to talk about her specific question was, what do you do if there's a discrepancy? So first let's just talk about the physical status modifiers. So the ASA does have an older resource called Payment Basic Series for physical status. As usual, I will link these onto the YouTube so you can find them easily. Talks about Medicare not paying for them and gives something that is very helpful to those of you who might be new, and that's like which of these are even payable and why. So here you will see it as a modifier, meaning that it modifies the description of the anesthesia service, but this is going to be one of your secondary modifiers typically that falls after your medical direction or your identifier for most of them on who's providing the services, like an AA for a personally performing physician or a QKQX care team, etc. So unless there's an exception here, you have a payer who says they need this in the first position. If so, that's going to be by specific contract, specific payer policy. And how do you find that out? You'll get a denial that says you're not putting it in the proper place. There is a pecking order with modifiers. I do believe that I've done a video on that, and if so, I will tag that to this one as well because I learned how to do that. So here this resource tells you what these are, the physical status modifiers, the description, and then it kind of gives you an overview of what some of the examples are, and these are the things that you might want to look for in the pre-anesthesia assessment to see if this is the determination. And if there's a discrepancy between the anesthesia record and the pre-anesthesia assessment, it could be that there's either a difference of an opinion between the provider who did the pre-anesthesia assessment and the one that did the ASA classification on the anesthesia record. So you do want to kind of find out which one is correct. And how you do that is you look for these comorbidities to describe that. And then, because typically what you get in your offices if you're doing billing are copies of the medical record, copies of the anesthesia record, you might want to say heads up to your doctors for compliance purposes to say there was a discrepancy, but this P3 is supported. Again, if it depends on the payer as to whether it's going to be covered or not, but you still want information in the medical record to be accurate. So here I'm going to also give you another link, and this explains how you do it by putting the physical status modifier on. It talks about the payment. They use examples, but they're very easy to follow, and look at that. They just updated this in July of 2024, so it's not as old as we think. 2019 was the article. They last reviewed it in 2024 and made any changes that were pertinent. This is on the ASA website. Now we're going to go to their statement on physical status, because this, I won't say it's new now, but when it came out, it was new. As a longtime coder, I used to look for examples of what comorbidities might be associated with these P3, P4, etc. And the only examples I could ever really find were on veterinary websites, but they were sometimes a little bit helpful, but it gave me a better understanding. So here, this is for human people. These are for patients, and they give pediatric examples. adult examples, and then obstetric examples, because every patient, even normal pregnancy patients, are a P2 just to start with. So that kind of gives you the clue there. If you see a P1 on a pregnancy patient and a P2 elsewhere, this is why, because maybe they didn't know that although pregnancy is not a disease per the ASA, the patient's physiologic state is different from someone who's not pregnant. So that's why they add that additional on there. Okay, so I covered the question, gave you the 2 resources. I went to AI because I kind of like AI for this, and I said, what payers allow payment for physical status modifiers? Because my rule of thumb is, Medicare doesn't. Not all policies address. And every once in a while, like Aetna puts something out saying, we're just not going to pay for this anymore. These are for-profit insurance companies that have stopped paying for the patients that are most difficult for anesthesia practitioners to take care of. So to me, that's not a good idea, and it cuts back on already decreasing payments for anesthesia groups. So not my favorite, but here's what I like to say, and if you've heard me at meetings, you've heard me say this before. Wayne Gretzky, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. So if you don't know if insurance is going to pay and you cannot find a policy, go ahead and report those physical status modifiers. If you have to add additional diagnosis codes to support the comorbidities, you'll find out if somebody asks you to do that. In our practice, when we were doing billing from our office, we didn't assign those comorbidities, but if the insurance company asked for it, we would give it to them. How many times did they ask? Not very many. So that was our rule of thumb. Bill it if you don't know. Diagnose code it if you need to. We didn't. And then just be very careful with those. You don't want to give diseases to patients who don't have them. So my special anesthesia friend who asked me that to do the YouTube, I hope that works for you. If not, and I missed something that you need to know, put it in the comments and I'll pick it up there. Otherwise, you know how I like to end it. Be kind to one another and generous with your knowledge. We do have another anesthesia meeting coming up just next month. I'll link that on my website as well, because, if you can come, that's great. There's so much more to these meetings when you're face-to-face with people and you can interact. Any kind of education is good. I like the webinars, but, in person is just something that, to me, you can't replace. So, all right, everybody have a good one.